We are now live.
Welcome, everybody. It's Matt Prohaska with Prohaska Consulting. Thanks for joining us early. Paige Dombrowski gets the award today for being the first one in through the doors virtually here at 25 past the hour. We will get started on time here in about 4 minutes. Feel free to use the chat area and, as we always try to do, replicating the meet and greet and getting to know everybody and schmoozing in the lobby before going into the auditorium. Feel free to use the chat and say howdy and let everybody know who you are and where you're from, company and location. We know that some folks have, around the world, been taking the opportunity, realizing that in certain states or countries, we might be sheltering in place a little bit longer than many had hoped or originally planned for. So we know people's physical locations may have changed. So definitely, if you're in home to or location to or COVID residents working from wherever, number two, feel free to let us know so we can appreciate and give shout outs to where folks are from all around the world. We know we historically have had about 7 or 8 countries represented live on each of these. We know another 4 or 5 will pick it up on demand from those that had registered already beforehand. So looking forward to today's topic around attribution and measurement with our special partners and sponsor, Survata. Welcome again, those of you who have just joined in. I'm Matt Prohaska. We'll be getting started in about 3 minutes here. Feel free to use the chat area to say howdy. Let us know where you're from, or picking up from a little theme we had a few weeks ago when we did this, if there is a new cuisine that you have discovered as a continuous chef or suddenly new chef in the home, what's your favorite COVID-based recipe or new dish that you've been preparing or at least enjoying with your family? Feel free to throw those out as well and take all the well-deserved kudos and applause that will come to this. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. A chocolate cheesecake with sour cream. I have heard of sour cream. That's one of the chats. I've heard of sour cream being used occasionally for cheesecake. As someone who prepares probably 10 meals or dishes a year, definitely respect not just obviously my wife, but everyone who is preparing meals on a more regular basis. One of the few things I do is make this cheesecake for my sister. She's a pastry chef professionally and someone who is a pretty darn good baker for her whole career. I try to step in for her birthday. It's something her late husband actually started 15 years ago that I've picked up the tradition of making a cheesecake for every single year. And I have looked at recipes we try to do something different every single year. We've looked at recipes with sour cream, but there's something, I don't know, my mind mentally goes towards sour cream and chive potato chips whenever I think of sour cream, which is another wonderful taste, but usually something that I don't associate with something New York style or otherwise that is part of dessert. Sounds like it must have been pretty good though. Out of this world, I will take as a recommendation that I need to get a little more culturally savvy and give that a shot and have not worry about the taste buds mixing up in my own mind. We'll get started in about 1 minute here. Great to have everyone with us. We're going to be talking attribution and measurement with our friends at Survata and with our friend Angelina Ng of the IIB and IIB Tech Lab, who runs this entire practice now. Just a couple of months on the job, and thrilled to have Angelina with us. No stranger to a lot of different training sessions that we have done, and no stranger we know to thousands of people around the industry, a great seasoned veteran, and someone that we are thrilled to have on board. Jake talking about the new smoker. That is, so now cheesecake and smoked ribs have actually, you've now highlighted 2 of the 10 things that I do every single year. So pretty good. We're 2 for 2 here. Not bad. Boy, you talk about making a decent omelet. Now we'll be 30% of the way done. These were not planned. So Jake, very impressive. We will talk smoked ribs afterward. Great to see now more than 50 folks on board here. We'll get started in just 1 more minute talking attribution and measurement while I'm starting to get very hungry here at 31 minutes past the hour here in the East. Why don't we get started, everybody? So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are live and when you are seeing this on demand. I'm Matt with Prohaska Consulting. Thrilled to be with you again for another edition of our Smarter from Home webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about the very, very important topics of attribution and measurement. And very proud and privileged to have with us both Ken and Chris from Survata, along with Angelina Ng from the IAB Tech Lab and the IAB, who will be our featured fireside chat. Here's the lineup that we've got for today. Again, we'll be doing a little bit, as always, a little bit of foundation building, a little bit of history, a little bit of background, a little bit of definition, and a little bit of a tease out of how we have been helping publishers, brands, and others in these 2 important spaces of attribution and measurement. We'll hear from our friends at Survata again that we're thrilled have been able to allow us to provide continuously this series for free to all those to attend. And then we'll have a fireside chat with our friend Angelina Ng at the IAB, and as always, take your questions live as we go. A little bit more housekeeping, same rules applying here. This has been working pretty darn well, so we're not changing a thing. Feel free to use the chat function or raise your hand in the icons there to be able to publicly ask throughout. We'll be gathering these and then saving them for the open Q&A at the end. If we do have time, we'll try to intersplice as we go, but usually it works best from a flow standpoint if we have those at the end. Everyone's going to be auto-muted until the end when we'll be unmuted, and ideally can have your questions live presented there. Otherwise, Renee, our hostess with the mostest, will be helping read those off and selecting and prioritizing those. And as always, this recording and the presentations, both ours and from Survata, will be made available and sent out afterwards to all of you here live and to all of you hearing this, of course, seeing this on demand. So I want to turn to, we'll be turning to Paul Cimino, Aaron Yasgar, and Amit Shah and our team to tag team some of the background here. Just for a little bit of context, again, if you're not as familiar and relatively new to our organization, we do help clients in 3 ways: with their tech, their targets, and or their talent, either on a strategic or operational or execution standpoint. And attribution and measurement, or A&M, is no different there. As we know, we consumers are going through journeys that are certainly unique in COVID times, but broadly unique as well in terms of being able to track appropriately and understand all the different media channel touch points that we go through in a particular day. Again, a little more limited maybe, as many of us still globally are sheltering in place, but here are some of the examples of what we still do in a digital and analog world, interacting with content and services and all of our favorite brands. We do know, though, that the world has been tilted a little bit in terms of where spend has gone because of 2 key reasons. And it's intentional that we had this webinar take place right after our identity webinar that we did just a couple weeks back. 3 companies doing really, really well. And what do they have in spades? They've got the best deterministic identity, and they've done the best job delivering solutions that attribute and give credit to their ads within their walled gardens and measuring appropriately, often, of course, through their own first-party measurement services that they've either built or acquired, and occasionally working with, as the rest of the ecosystem does, with other third-party measurement systems. You're going to hear from one of the top services coming up here in a little bit. But what I'm going to do is toss to Aaron Yasgar first, who will take us through some of the key marketer challenges that the walled gardens and others present. Aaron, part of our global marketer and agency strategy team, thrilled to have her with us 5 years running. Aaron?
Hi, everybody. When we are out there working with our clients, we are seeing a lot of the same challenges across the board for everybody. There's definitely a trend in these. So the standardization of measurement across the channels is something that in the past year we've worked on with about 5 different clients in terms of this fragmentation that challenges the ability to do standardization of measurement. The path to purchase is complicated. Matt just mentioned the walled gardens. So really trying to get those consumer journeys in place and have those offline, online touch points and understand the effect on the KPIs is a challenge for mostly everyone that we speak to. Trust and transparency, also a challenge. Is the technology reporting back the right information? Or is the world tagged properly? And that really goes into the validity of the data as well, and whether what folks are seeing through systems are correct based on how they have their ecosystems set up. So that complexity again is the big challenge. And the walled gardens, as we talked about, definitely a challenge in terms of connecting those dots, and we're seeing that getting more and more challenging as they become more closed off from trying to connect those dots together. Now, I think Paul Semino will be taking us, we're gonna have to go through each of those challenges in a little bit more detail, and Paul's gonna kick us off with some fundamentals around attribution.
Good morning, everyone. So attribution measurement, brand lift, modeling, return on ad spend, these are overlapping, sometimes confusing sort of synonyms, and you know, the jargon in ad tech is famously thick. And what, for the purposes of this exercise, we're going to try to separate it and talk about different tools and techniques in regards to your business, a brand, where at the top of your marketing funnel, you're trying to get brand lift and awareness, and you're doing brand studies. And in the, sorry. But the 2 major parts that we're separating into, the 2 buckets are, top of the funnel is more about lift, and the bottom of the funnel is more about attributing sales to different elements in the middle and lower funnel. So the and the main case that we're trying to talk about is the junction of those 2 worlds. So while media mix modeling and brand lift studies and panels and things that are more top of funnel, the big questions being asked of attribution systems and measurement systems is how can they play into the lower funnel? How can you tell a brand story and from awareness all the way through purchase intent and loyalty? And if you look at that sort of from a logical standpoint, it becomes about the data access of your attribution measurement system. And that means access to all kinds of touch points, measurement, viewability. Sorry, Matt, I think you're gonna have to take control because it's just kind of moving around on me.
No problem, here we go.
Thanks. So data access, and then, you know, good old fashioned ad tech integration. Are your partners and your existing systems, if you've in-house some of this, are they integrated with all the different solutions and platforms out there? Do you or your partner have a robust analytics system that can see across all this data and all these integration points? And then probably the most important question is, how are you validating these things? What is it that you're trying to measure? Because if the traditional measure points of the silos are not, you know, going to pay the bills going forward, it's got to be some sort of a cross-screen, cross-channel measurement effort to get to this place that we're talking about. And then the last step is actions. What can your measurement and attribution systems recommend either at a macro level or in sort of, where we think the industry's heading at a log event level. Where can they head? I'm gonna go next. And what where Prohaska sees this whole store going is something we're, calling holistic attribution measurement, a little play on the word holistic, meaning whole, encompassing enterprise attribution measurement, the whole funnel. And this means that you're going to have to incorporate, brand lift, media mix modeling, and multi-touch attribution in one system. And I'll go into a little bit of that in a second. And drilling into the journey that brands are on right now, most folks have been using last click, last touch attribution for the longest time, and moving that data and getting media mix modeling, which is also traditional and sort of legacy. Mixing these two things is sort of the step. Where the industry seems to be right now is in elaborate multi-touch attribution, which has much more elaborate math involved and is dealing with cross-screen and is at some, log level or atomic user level, able to, at least knit two channels together and measure them. We at Prohaska, we have had, experiences of automotive companies that have sent email and then followed the email up with very targeted display and measured the lift. And there seems to be a whole world of statistics just between those two channels. And we're not saying that every brand has to go for the holistic whole Megillah here. It depends on the taxonomy of what it is that you're selling. If it's retailers who are more transactional, it might be that they touch at multi-touch attribution. If it's something complex like automotive, where you have 3 tiers of spend, sort of the national, regional, and local, you might need a holistic measurement system. So it is not a one-size-fits-all journey, and we are not saying that everyone has to go all the way to holistic. So looking at sort of the aspects of each of these, the major types of measurement and attribution, media mix modeling is well vetted. It's been around for a long time, and it's still being used because it's a very good steering wheel. The trouble is you're sort of steering and looking in the rearview mirror at the same time. It's sort of macro data coming together. It's summary data. It's a top-down approach, and it's very hard to get that information from the top down back up to the dashboard. So your ability to optimize from a mixed modeling standpoint is, I think some companies are trying to do it quarterly from what we've seen, but it's really a semi-annual or even in most cases annual process. Separate from that, multi-touch attribution, it is multi-channel and it's event level, it is bottoms up, and it's closer to real time, and in some cases it is real time. But it's hard to see the whole picture from an MTA because it's hard to see MTA because it's mostly digital. It's to see what that is doing in non-digital or non-digitally measured channels like linear television or outdoor or mail or call or some of the other things that marketers have to deal with that are not part of the MTA universe. And the holistic attribution system that we're talking about going forward is more part of the move that we're seeing. That's just marketing and advertising in general are going enterprise, meaning the bigger software companies are getting involved, and the data structures are bigger, and the machine learning capabilities are much less expensive and onerous than they used to be. So this is where you've got, sort of the all-knowing, all-being attribution system that can see any touch point across channels and figure out, for someone like me who's been thinking about buying an electric car, two leases that I've had. It just hasn't been right. But for an automaker to see me, they have to put me in a segment because I'm not in their funnel yet. And then how they score me and how I come down through interest and intent and how many times I hit, either content or their website or ads, and then get me into intent, and then get a couple of touches on me, get my email address, hash that, see that across channels, measure that, and drive me down. This is, we think, the long view of the consumer process advertisers want, that we're calling journey mapping, and the WAM is really the measurement system that is driving that process. And, so we won't spend a lot of time on this, but drilling into media mix modeling, I don't want to downplay how complex it is. And it is a little bit looking past, but there are some very sophisticated vendors out there in media mix modeling. And we're starting to see media mix modeling companies either team up or in some cases be acquired by larger enterprise data companies. So here you can see all of the digital channels that someone is trying to measure, and feeding in the geo data or whatever they can get from sort of the Comscore Nielsen world of non-digital, figuring out how that turns into either lift or sales, and a very robust stuff, but pretty much only able to do it like once or twice a year. MTA, which we discussed a little about, is much more granular and much more event driven, not as macro. So the marriage of these two things is where we think the industry's heading. So measurement is and attribution is not standalone. You've heard me talking a lot about audience, and top of funnel has been more about measurement of media and viewability and fraud and decay and all these other things. But audience is starting to creep up into that the top of the funnel measurement systems, and we think it will all be audience driven, which is why we're talking about the data lake and sort of the pack rat of data, and having all this data rationalized and collated, normalized, and hygiene, and living in one place, which is a data lake. We think that identity is part of that, because even though you're not identifying prospects at a granular level, meaning people that have never seen your product or service before, you still want to know what they are from a scoring segment standpoint. So the marriage of identity, whether it's just geo or zip code or something like that, IP address, to those segments. The big analytical, the big data analytics system is key to that. Machine learning systems that are now sort of on tap. And then the measurement, which we're portraying here, is all the data coming in, and sort of the event level stuff, and how you sort of set your fishing lines out there, all coming into this WAM. Now, if you look at the outer boxes, this is all sort of CDP is what people are calling it. This is really an enterprise marketing system. And what we're portraying here is that, Wham, if you like the band, and 80s rock, a little play on words, but Wham is really sort of the driver, the killer app, the keeper of the secret formula of how you find, interest, acquire, and make loyal new customers, and how you get share of wallet. So that's sort of where we see things going with attribution and measurement. And just to put that on the next slide, from a funnel standpoint, think about the funnel a little bit differently. Rather than just the advertising funnel, think about the loyalty funnel in conjunction with this. You have sort of, the top of the funnel is where sort of the Google, Amazon, Facebook are successful, and sort of towards the middle, and, piercing that veil is another part of this exercise. If you just look at the right side, the incrementality is sort of top of funnel. the media mix modeling and MTA is sort of the same side of a different equation, or two parts of the same equation. One is sort of a top-down method of looking at return on your ad spend. The other is a bottom-up. And we're talking about WAM with all of these things together. So this is the use case that we want to leave you with is, how do you take top of funnel, drive segmentation up in top of funnel, which was born from the bottom of the funnel, and create sort of a perpetual exercise for your marketing systems, which we're calling a holistic attribution measurement system, within a big data set or a CDP. So with that burst of information, I'm going to hand it back to Amit to talk about the publisher side of this.
Great. Thanks, Paul. And wanted to, sorry, Matt is there. You can click to the next slide. Most of the conversation up until this point, we've looked at this from the marketer perspective and recognizing the value of measurement and attribution to determine effectiveness. From the publisher perspective, equally as important, publishers have a role to play. One, looking at it from a measurement perspective, knowing the audience, knowing what your KPIs are, having solutions, data partners where you have the analytics to understand your audience. Ultimately and eventually, and building on some of the themes that Paul alluded to, identity becomes a critical part. So as publishers continue to evolve, expand more so into advanced measurement and getting into attribution solutions, building and developing their own ID systems that help map to other platforms, control the experience, and have a unique proprietary data set, which will help build attribution solutions. And from the publisher perspective, finding ways, working with marketers to look at campaign level analytics, providing that back with your advertiser spend so they get an idea and you can highlight your performance of what makes your inventory unique and that you're helping drive value ultimately, which is obviously their goal, hitting their KPI, ROAS, ROI. From a data perspective, want to make sure that publishers look at this opportunity to bring in all of the ad server log files. This isn't just what is the reach and frequency, how do we target better, how do we understand our audience better. All of that is established foundationally from data collection. So that's getting the log files, looking at different devices, who's likely to interact. You get that also from your SSPs. How do we ingest that log, and then putting this into a data warehouse, machine learning based insights to look at performance. What are the drivers? How can we control and optimize so that we're helping improve results, which helps your advertisers from an attribution perspective. And fundamentally, thinking of this from the sales organization, from media companies, we're delivering to outcomes. Typically, the focus is how do we get the deal? How do we get a large spend? But ultimately, what's going to drive that performance and spend for that marketer is performance. So looking at these principles from an attribution and measurement, publishers play a critical role, and wanted to highlight this is a continued journey that also exists for publishers. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Amit, Paul, and Aaron. Want to quickly move to our friends at Survata. Thrilled to have been working with Chris and his team, Chris Kelly, their CEO, who you see here, and his team for several years now. Great background, great methodology, great bottoms-up insights and foundational core to their efforts. And they're going to be speaking a little bit around the measurement conventional wisdom and kind of comparing that to the reality of today. And we're thrilled to have on Chris's team Ken Archer, their VP of Product, who's going to take us through their solution and some of their points of view on the measurement side of things. Ken?
Thanks, Matt. All right. One sec. All right. Yeah, so I'm Ken Archer. I'm VP of Product at Survata, and really excited to share with you some of the what we see as some of the key myths or maybe conventional wisdom around measurement that is not entirely true. This is content that we find extremely valuable to share with our clients. We get a lot of questions about measurement. It can be a confusing ecosystem. And so let's dive right in. So the first area where we get a lot of questions is just really getting sort of a market map of measurement, because it can be extremely confusing what the choices are and how they relate to each other. So this is the market map that we think makes the most sense. The top level distinction is between delivery metrics and outcome metrics. So delivery metrics would answer the question, are you getting what you paid for? Okay, so delivery metrics would be reach, frequency, TV ratings. So this would be like Nielsen DAR, or maybe reach and frequency you can get from your third-party ad server, viewability, brand safety from IAS and Moat. Delivery metrics are more often deterministic. They sometimes have some modeling, but they are generally going to be far more deterministic and answering the question, do you get what you paid for? Compared to outcome metrics, which is answering a different question. And now within outcome metrics, we believe that there is a pretty clear distinction between two types of outcome-based measurements that are often conflated. And that is between attribution, which answers the question, who should get credit, which assigns credit for actions, versus incrementality based solutions, which answer a different question. They answer the question, did this campaign work at all? Or did this media or creative tactic work at all? All right, so the key difference between attribution and incrementality is attribution takes your conversions, your actions as a given, and it's assigning credit for them. Whereas for incrementality-based solutions, you have to have a control group. So incrementality would be where you're doing causal analysis. So examples of incrementality would be obviously incrementality studies that you do on media platforms like Facebook, YouTube, DSPs that support incrementality studies like Xandr Invest and Trade Desk. Also brand outcomes providers like Kantar and Survata. Location outcome providers like PlaceIQ, and of course sales outcomes providers like IRI. So these incrementality-based providers, even though some of them use the word attribution in their product names, what they are using control groups, whereas attribution-based providers are not. And there's a reason why they're not, which we'll get to in the next slide. It's not that like they just didn't think of it. But attribution-based providers are either doing bottoms-up attribution with MTA or top-down attribution with MMM. So some of our customers have had concerns about attribution setting up perverse incentives for their media partners, because of course, if you just assume that the campaign works and you're assigning credit, then well, your media partners know how your measurement systems work if that's the measurement system they're using. And so they're not incentivized to actually drive causal lift. They're incentivized to just have impressions show up in a log for someone who is going to convert, and that whether that impression is viewable or not. So we wrote some stuff up on this on Adweek. You might want to check out last year. But so that's the market map that our customers have found very helpful in orienting themselves around the options and measurement. So now with that as like a framework, let's dive into some conventional wisdom and reality around measurement. And a lot of it has to do with this thorny issue of control groups. So the first is that DR campaigns are more measurable than brand campaigns. We hear this a lot, and there's this sense that brand outcome measurement is soft, hard to measure, whereas DR campaigns, you can have confidence in the results. And The data scientists who actually work in these measurement companies know that the reality is the reverse is actually the truth. That brand campaigns you can actually have a higher level of confidence in the results that you get from brand outcomes measurement than from measuring a DR campaign. Now, this seems really counterintuitive, right? You have actual conversions in a DR measurement. So why is that? Well, it comes back to this issue of control groups, which are central. So it's easier to create cross-channel control groups in brand campaigns. So obviously we're 1 to 2 decades into the increasing fragmentation of media, which is making more and more complicated media plans. And so if you're going to do incremental measurement, you need a control group, and that control group, in order to be of any useful sample size, to be more precise, needs to be across your fragmented media partners, right? And you can do cross-channel control groups in brand campaigns. It's nearly impossible to do it in DR campaigns. Why is that? That's because DR campaigns, they have to use holdout control groups. Every single media platform has to do a holdout control group. Whereas in brand campaigns, basically if the media is trackable, you can create what are called synthetic control groups that work cross channels. You can aggregate, blend the data across your entire media plan. Why is that? Why do DR campaigns have to use these holdout control groups? Well, that's because DR campaigns must be narrowly targeted to be effective, right? And so there's too few non-exposed media target members to create a synthetic control group. Whereas with brand campaigns that have broader targets, there's plenty of non-exposed members of those media targets to track and create these highly accurate synthetic control groups across your entire media plan. So that's why it's actually it's easier to have very precise, high level of confidence measurement when you're doing brand outcomes measurement than with DR measurement, where we just have this challenge that we can't do incrementality studies across our media plan. It's a problem the industry has not fixed yet. So what's another area of conventional wisdom? Again, it gets back to control groups, is that so a control group is a campaign level set of representative non-exposed people, campaign level being the key thing there. So whenever you, if you have ever gotten a study from one of those companies that we listed, that does incrementality measurement in terms of location lift, sales lift, brand lift, you want to look at the specific tactics that you can use to drive your campaign, whether it's media tactics, creative tactics, frequency. And you want to ask the question, is there a tactic level control group here? Or are you using just the campaign level control group? Most companies just use the campaign level control group and apply it to each individual tactic. Well, you can't do that. In order to incrementally measure media and creative tactics and frequency bands, you have to use tactic level control groups. Otherwise, you're just measuring the differences in pre-existing attitudes towards your brand or pre-existing sales or visit habits by the people who are exposed to these different media tactics. Or in the case of frequency, where we have an example here, really what you're measuring, if you use an overall baseline for every different frequency band, is whether people who spend more time on the internet have a more favorable attitude towards your brand or not, which is basically worthless from an optimization perspective. What you want to know is for people at each frequency band, are you driving causal lift? So you have to control for things like time spent on the internet. In order to do that, you have to have a tactic specific control group. So, it's some difficult stuff to get your head around sometimes, but it's actually pretty make or break stuff when it comes to selecting a measurement vendor and having a measurement plan that you can actually use to drive results. The third is brand lift studies are backward-looking report cards used to see if a campaign was effective. So this has been a really thorny issue that is sort of a secret in brand outcomes measurement that I'm going to share with you all, is that legacy brand outcomes providers, they avoid daily remodeling of the control. Again, we're using, remember, synthetic controls when we're doing incrementality measurement. So that means it's a model. They avoid remodeling the control every day to avoid erratic day-to-day lift results. So if you look at the light blue line in the chart, that's what it would look like if brand lift vendors remodeled the control and basically provided daily results. This is why brand outcomes, and it's the same with other, visit or sales lift. This is why the deliverable is usually, the customer's attention is shifted towards a physical deliverable, a PDF, a PowerPoint that's delivered post-campaign or maybe once or twice mid-campaign, is because if they actually put this daily on their dashboard and updated their model, you would see results jumping all over the place. And you don't see that when you just get 1 or 2 reports throughout the course of a campaign. So the solution to that is ML-based weighting. There has been a lot of exciting research in the econometrics community around this over the last decade, that different measurement companies, including Survata, are leveraging. With ML-based weighting, daily model changes can be smoothed so that daily lift results don't overreact to new data. So this is, again, this feels like, wow, this is a lot of math to get my head around, but it's actually pretty critical, because if you want to actually use this very precise data, because it is causal incremental measurement, if you want to use it to optimize, well, then you actually need it on a regular basis. You can't just get it once mid-campaign and once at the end of the campaign, at which point it's not really useful anymore from an optimization perspective. All right. So the last one we want to point to is that brand lift studies are just population level metrics. So this is another exciting area of research that we've been pushing on. Is the reality is that brand lift measurement can generate individual level scores for optimization. So this is what you, one of the things that you want from your outcomes-based measurement provider is, I don't just want to get reports or that I can use to pull levers. Maybe I want to actually use this data to score customers. Of course, this is like the CDP vision, where you can use the results of a campaign, mid-campaign, to score either your list of first-party customers or score in a third-party environment with cookies or mobile app IDs based on their propensity to respond or be lifted by a campaign. So this is something that CDPs do. This is something that we do as well in brand outcome measurement, where in addition to measuring the lift in brand outcomes overall and by different media and creative tactics, we can actually measure on an individual level. We can measure brand lift, someone's propensity to be lifted by a campaign. So it's an exciting area in stats research we've been leveraging. It's called individual treatment effects. So those are kind of the 4 myths or conventional wisdoms that we, in the last couple of years, have been shedding light on with our customers. And yep, that's the end of my presentation, Matt.
Great, thank you, Ken. Great stuff. As you guys have heard from Ken and Chris, the conventional wisdom is built up based on human beings executing the same practices and behavior often for more than a couple of decades. We have, in this complicated world, and this will transition to our next chat here with Angelina, a lot of folks that have come from a more traditional background or who have been steeped for several decades in linear television and executing fantastic campaigns and seeing brand lift through metrics and measurement tactics that certain folks have been providing with panels and other forums for many, many years. And that world and that dance that has been conducted between brands, their agency partners, and publishers or broadcasters has been, quite set for a while. And then we have this other world of a more digital, more deterministic or even probabilistic identified world where you can get into incrementality and seeing brand lift on an individualized basis, as Ken just showed, and seeing these two worlds together and how you can fit the pieces together from both whatever is best for, again, the outcomes for the brand, but also really getting a sense of the reality of the reporting and the analytics and the skill set and the knowledge and the rhythm that's established from publisher to agency and to brand. So Ken, if you wouldn't mind, thank you for that. You can see Ken's email there if you want to reach him or anybody else on the Survata team, ken@survata.com. Thank you again for all those great insights. We want to turn our attention now to one of our best friends in the industry, and really thrilled to have Angelina Ng with us here. She is the relatively new, but knowing Angelina and already seeing a lot of her work from her first committee meeting that she had just last week, not so new anymore in terms of experience, and already digging her fingers into the soil here, tackling these two areas. She is focused on that as the leader for measurement and attribution with the IAB and with the IAB Tech Lab. Angelina, great to have you with us. And first, for the folks here on the call and those on demand, give us a sense of your background beforehand. If those of you, the few of you who don't know Angelina, having been a seasoned veteran and an old timer in this space for more than 2 decades, Angelina, just walk us through a little bit of the experiences either at Merkle or at Morgan Stanley or prior to that have kind of led to this perfect opportunity for you to be helping lead this space now for the whole industry.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm glad to be here. I've been in this industry for about 24 years. I think, Matt, you and I met in 1995 or 1996. Probably as a
96.
Was it 96? All right.
Yeah.
So I started off as an account director or in account management at Young & Rubicam. And for the first 10 years of my career, worked at Young & Rubicam, J. Walter Thompson, Moda Media as an account manager, project manager, if you will, developing digital strategies for our clients, developing websites, marketing, digital marketing collaterals, and so forth. The next, and within there, I was also handling digital media. So I was a media director for some time within that first 10 years, working on accounts such as Unilever, Kraft Foods, Dr. Pepper, 7-Up, Anderson Consulting, more on the, and doing lots of fun, engaging brand entertainment stuff. The next 10 years, I moved over to ad operations. I oversaw it at Cara, which then led to Dentsu, purchased by Dentsu, and then to Merkle. And now Merkle is purchased by Dentsu, so ironic. When I said to Doug Ray, he bought Merkle, and they actually did 2 years later, so quite interesting. So
Circle of life. Circle of life, we call that, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So in ad ops, and I think that's where a lot of my experience came from for this role, was really understanding the logistics and being able to not only traffic campaigns, but traffic campaigns that enable data analysis. So we focused on taxonomy and understanding what were the API connections that we needed to ascertain, and how did we marry up data, and then getting yelled at by the analytics team every time something was trafficked wrong and they weren't able to do analysis. We also normalized data, we classified data, and then that led me over to, and doing a lot of assessments of different platforms. So I was part of the IAB Ad Ops Committee that looked at viewability and ad verification, as well as the Programmatic Council. And then that led me to Morgan Stanley on the client side, developing their digital or their analytics, overseeing their analytics practice for all of marketing. once this opportunity at the IAB and IAB Tech Lab, I saw it seemed like a great fit. It allowed me to take the business side of my brain and connect it with the tech side. So I always loved working with the tech teams and really helping to troubleshoot some of the issues that we were having with conversion tags, with measurement, and understanding the nuances when it came to the difference between ad tech and MarTech.
Cool. Thank you for that. So yeah, as you guys can tell, perfect background from several different areas. And we titled this talking about process and process to practice. And there's no one who understands, again, the dirty fingernails aspects of process better than Angelina. Angelina, help us verify some of our definitions here, because I was thinking of an analogy last night where it seems like sometimes measurement and attribution, we all lump it together like it's one topic or one practice, but really it's a couple of different disciplines, as we saw from Survata, focused very much on obviously brand measurement and incrementality there. The analogy I was using was around viewability and fraud, where a lot of times people would not understand that those are two separate issues, even though they're somewhat related. These are two separate practices, but are obviously related. The concept of setting up how you're going to keep score in attributing things, and then going about and measuring it accurately. How would anything you'd change about some of our definitions, or how you look at defining those two practices, since that's part of the same umbrella practice that you're overseeing now?
So I think they're connected. However, I do think that they're separate. So on the measurement side, it's being able to collect data, put it together. And in a lot of cases, it's not getting into the raw log level, or raw ad level data. You can take aggregate data, combine it together, and develop reporting. So being able to identify what can be measured and how to put it together. Attribution is really understanding the why things are working, and who is actually seeing those ads, and the impact that advertising has, or any initiative that you have, to your conversion data. So for me, at the IAB, I actually have two working groups. One's focused on measurement and reporting framework, and understanding what data points need to be collected in order to combine it together and get a holistic report. And then on the attribution side is more of like your advanced insights of looking at audience behavior, exposure data, and figure out what are the things that are driving those conversions or those behaviors.
Nice. So since they are, again, different things and then related, why don't I get into a little bit of your remit there and some of the things that you're focused on? I mean, as we know, measurement, like we had talked about earlier, it can be different things to different folks, and depending on the media channel you work on. I mean, I think of, speaking of fellow old timers and where we were in our careers in 1995 and 96, I'm thrilled to see folks like Chris Geraci on this call, who was my boss's boss in 95 at BBDO and in the television group, and his boss, Steve Grubbs, who ran the whole show for so many years that now Chris runs there. I'm thinking about Chris's old teammate, Jonathan Stewart, and our friend who ran the research practice there, that Angelina, you obviously know well, and the need for trying to find a more common path of apples to apples is part of the goal with the IB. Where are the priorities right now, when so much of it is, a lot of it is, of course, just getting people off of only last click, last touch as the primitive mindset there. But how are the things, are the things that you're looking to build and communicate out that you rolled out as part of your process just last week with your committees, able to then ultimately bridge into a real multi-channel apples to apples? Or is it, hey, we need to kind of nail it for this so-called digital world first, and then bridge into television and radio or out of home or other media channels? So
when it comes to just measuring and attributing data, even both sides, the focus is on standardization and education, right? And what are the changes that are going to occur in the future that would impact the practice of attribution and analysis. So I have, I'm particularly focused on, so it falls back to the two working groups. The one working group where it's identifying how can we improve the data sets that we get, and that is being collected by our platforms and bring it together? Are there things around definitions or labeling and taxonomy that there's some confusion about, right? And then how do we ensure that, you know, a data set that we're getting from one platform is comparable to another platform's data? I like to use the, you know, analogy, two different analogies. Let's just use impressions as a label. You know, you have many platforms that call it total impressions, delivered impressions, bids won, biddable impressions, and so forth. And at the end of the day, it's really around how many requests were conducted, as well as how many ads were actually rendered, right? So there's the request and there's the rendering. And one is, you know, and being able to just understand when you're looking at the data set, which ones to actually pick side by side when you're especially trying to reconcile between two different platforms. Additionally is understanding what identifiers that we should be using universally, right? So the ad ID org came up with the universal ad ID for video. Is that something that we need for display ads, for social, and for native? How do we you know, come up with what that would look like and understand some of the logistics around how each platform works? A lot of discussions are, you know, especially on the publisher side, you have so many agencies that represent brands. You have brands that are actually buying from you, and then you have buyers, you know, purchasing media through the programmatic platform. So, you know, I've heard from various publishers that, you know, it would be great if there was a universal advertiser, right? So the ability to actually see across your inventory who the end advertiser is and what category or vertical that they fall in, right? So that you can better understand your inventory, who's actually purchasing, and when you go to your upfronts or when you go to the buyers, to be able to say, hey, this is the amount of inventory that we have, that we ran for you, and this is what we're seeing across performance of where things are, where people are clicking on, what people are interested in, and you know, that benefits the publisher. Same with the advertiser, is understanding where our ads are running, both programmatically and through our direct buys, and as well as on Facebook or social, being able to combine all your initiatives that you're running with publisher and collecting all of that data and being able to say, hey, this is the amount of inventory that I actually ran on you know, example, New York Times or Wall Street Journal. Right now, it's really hard to pull that data and bring it together. So that's one aspect. The other working group that I have is around attribution. And I think the biggest challenge there is that no one wants to share their secret sauce on how they actually develop attribution models or how they're using their data to understand their audiences. So this group is to help standardize and or at least educate on the different methods and approaches that that many companies are currently deploying. Now part of the reason for that is with, you know, the deprecation of cookies and the browsers putting their foot down on trying to protect consumers' privacy, is how are we going to do that in the future? If the browsers have their way, there will be they're pulling away they're taking away the third-party cookie and disabling any user or device identifier, which is really, as you know, as Survata and Amit and Paul had mentioned, looking at log level data is really important, right? So if most of those identifiers are taken away and we're looking at aggregate data, how are we going to handle this in the future?
So I want to pick up on that theme and see where the parallels are. There are intentionally two logos here on your slide because you're really part of two groups. One is leading the M&A practice for the IAB, which is, again, a global franchising organization, and you're focused in the US, but obviously work with all the different IAB offices. And then the Tech Lab, which, as most know, is a global arm and division intentionally set up to create standards. We've been privileged to have helped IAB Tech Lab in launching Project REARC back a few months ago, and that is now off and running in terms of creating new standards in the post-cookie world. Speaking of those browsers, Angelina, can you speak a little bit to where the paths are parallel and validate or debunk how synonymous or important it is that there is proper identity solutions carried out that are consumer first, privacy first, along with then parallel improved measurement and attribution practices? Kind of how does your work dovetail with the work of Jordan Mitchell and the rest of the Tech Lab team?
Yeah. So I, on the IAB side, I am US only, although we do have a few people from our member international counterparts. But it's really gathering the feedback from these working groups and talking to our members, bringing that back to the Tech Lab and having to ensure that any standard protocols or standardizations that they develop meet the needs of both the buy side and the sell side. I also work with the local international offices, or will be, and so making sure that we are mirroring some of the practices and working structures with them so that we can collectively gather that from a global perspective, and again, bringing that back to the Tech Lab. On the reverse side is taking some of those standard protocols that the Tech Lab developed and describing it to people who aren't very tech savvy, and what are the benefits and some of the challenges that you may have given what is or isn't developed.
Very good. Last quick question here before we get to the broader Q&A here. So it's a classic getaway question. You've heard this from me many times, and it's a standard one on Fireside. So a year from now, where do you, I know where we can all say we want the world to look in a post-COVID world, but from an M&A standpoint, where would you see the world ending up, or what are your asks required of folks that you need to be able to get the industry where you and many agree it should be a year from now?
I think in a year from now, we'll have, along with all the other trade organizations, come up with some of the standard requirements for reporting, and be able to hopefully, especially in CTV and in audio, specifically podcasts, how that would be measured, and being able to enable companies to collect that data in a centralized fashion without the pains and the headaches that they currently have, and them trying to figure it out on their own. I expect that a lot of the platforms and publishers will adapt to this, because it not only makes it easier for the buy side to analyze data, but it will also make their lives easier. And so there's a financial economic benefit to getting some standardizations in place.
Good deal. Thank you, Angie. I want to quickly transition to some Q&A, and actually this first one that we see came across. Angelina, if you wouldn't mind starting off with here, from Ryan, getting your thoughts on out-of-home. Actually, there was another question that came in earlier around out-of-home as well. We know that the measurement challenge or an opportunity there is a little different, given the nature, of course, of one screen and then multiple impressions as opposed to a phone or a television in a home. How do those, some of those, the work that you're doing kind of dovetail into the methodologies of the impression multiplier, and have you been able to kind of tackle that? I know you're only still a few weeks literally on the gig, but the IB has had some efforts there, certainly overall, and best practices. We've done some work with other trade groups as well, and just curious about out-of-home and how that fits in, please.
I would say that out-of-home will most likely be covered in the work that we do on the measurement and attribution committees. However, I think most of what we'll be focusing on is trackable media and trackable data, and the ability to do that. We understand that digital out-of-home is shifting more towards digital out-of-home, so we do expect that there's some components of out-of-home that would be covered. There may be some, especially in the attribution group, what we'll ask is if some people can provide both online and offline measurement and attribution approaches. However, it's more looking at trying to cover the entire digital ecosystem making that as a foundation. I would say for standard out of home, that's something I think that ANA or the 4As are probably looking at.
Good deal. One more question here for Amit, and then maybe Paul from an anonymous, but I'm going to guess it's from someone at a publisher or broadcaster here. If I do provide more granular attribution from a WHAM type of approach, does that mean I can charge a higher CPM than my competition? We should have had that as a headline at the end and sort of the so what here, but certainly the point of this is that inventory gets more valuable, the audiences and the engagement and the attribution then according to it around showing cause and effect is more valuable. Demand should go up from that and CPM should rise. Counter to that, there should be an easier path for the brand as well to have less waste on their end and understand kind of what the true north is of where things, of why things are the way they are. So it should be kind of a overall flight to quality. Meet. Would you agree?
I would really go ahead. No, you can answer first.
Absolutely. From a publisher perspective, it's all about raising the value of the inventory. So if a publisher has the opportunity to show better performance, better alignment to the advertiser's goal, which improves their return on ad spend, then you've got the ability to charge for it. Ultimately, that's the marketer's goal. The more the publisher does, the value of the inventory goes up. It's a deeper connection that you establish with the marketer because now you're both looking at this from a performance-based opportunity. Your value in the relationship goes up and the value of your inventory increases. So yeah, absolutely.
I would totally agree with that. Based on my experience, when when there's more of a one-to-one marketing, at Merkle they have M1 or what is now Mercury. A lot of the campaigns that we tested when I was there, because it was just kind of starting to grow, given the Dentsu acquisition, is that anytime we use our own first-party audiences and match that against the publishers, the CPMs would be higher, but we also saw that the outcomes were even better, right? So there's a lot less waste, a lot more efficiencies, and advertisers are willing to pay more as long as, from a CPA or an ROI, it performs. At the end of the day, they want their dollars focused on quality people, and the publishers, based on your data and based on the client's data, being able to bring that together is a win-win for both sides.
Fantastic. Thank you, Angelina and everyone. So that concludes today's session. Wanted to highlight our upcoming schedule here. We do have our first half-day session, but our first 4 light fee webinar coming up. I was just pulling up Jonathan Stewart's profile to make sure I had his background properly when I was referencing him earlier. Sorry about that. But here is CDP University that we're proud to be presenting on May 27th. Part of the class is self-paced and on demand ahead of time. And then we're going to be doing a live workshop on May 27th. So it's about a half day's worth of overall content, but we know in today's multitasking world with a lot of people at home, certainly able to be more on demand, but capturing 4 hours plus of people's attention live in a setting without being able to close a real door and have us all literally together. There might be some distractions, and breaking it up into pieces might make more sense. So we are giving that a shot and thrilled to be having that with audience as our first half-day session and keeping, again, costs relatively low for that initiative. You can see either the emails or our social or take a look at our homepage where it'll be promoted shortly. With that, the rest of our schedule looks like this. We are thrilled to have the Grand Alan Schulman from our team, former head of the content practice at Deloitte, leading out our content marketing module and initiative here in a couple of weeks. We'll be talking about OTT over the top and CTV connected TV a couple weeks from then, and then bringing back Jonathan and the rest of our marketer and agency leaders talking about the benefits of programmatic creative. We do have some interest around influencer marketing and a few other topics, so we're going to look to splice those in where timing and our underwriters' time is available. So with that, on behalf of the entire team you see here. A big thanks to Rob and Chris from Survata for helping co-produce and being a great part of this, showcasing their wares and intelligence and methodology. A big thanks to Angelina Ng at the IAB and IAB Tech Lab. And we look forward to seeing you at our next Smarter from Home series. We know, again, folks, that we're now 60 days, most of us are 60 days in the shelter in place. And while we do have some gradual opening, we do know there is great economic challenge and suffering out there, and certainly either personal or we are all a degree of separation away from someone who's been directly affected by this. We do look forward to getting through this together. We will see you on the other side, and we hope everyone continues to be healthy and safe. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.